Welcome to the February 5th, 2019 Millis School Committee. Before we begin the meeting, I'd like to announce that this meeting is being recorded and can be viewed on Mondays at 7 p.m. on Comcast Channel 8 or Verizon Channel 37. All meeting videos are also posted to the Millis Public Schools website under School Committee, and all times on the agenda are approximate. I am Stephen Catalano, the chairperson. Secretary Kerry Roach.
Here.
Robin Briggs.
Here.
Mark Conroy.
Here.
Denise Gibbons.
Here.
There is no teacher rep tonight. Drew O'Reilly, student rep, is here. And the superintendent, Nancy Gustafson.
Here.
Okay. Jody, is there anyone signed in for open session?
There is none.
Okay. So next, I'd like to go to action items. First action item is the consideration to approve the 1/29/2019 school committee meeting minutes.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Conroy.
I make a motion that we approve the meeting minutes from the January 29th school committee meeting as presented.
Okay.
Second.
A motion's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Next action item is the consideration to approve an out-of-state trip on February 15th, 2019 to Rhode Island. It is a trip, Mr. Femino's class, to go to the Dunkin' Donuts Center to
sing at halftime.
sing at halftime for what, do we know what game it is?
No,
Is it okay.
I think
A game.
Providence Bruins.
It could be-
I think they might be.
It could be college basketball, it
I'll
could be
look it up.
Bruins.
No, I think it's.
Huh?
I
I'll look it up.
All right.
think it's.
I mean, we can.
So as
keep moving,
everyone
but I
knows,
will-
any out-of-state trips have to be approved by the committee, by policy. The superintendent will look at these requests initially ahead of that, so this is kind of a formality. I guess unless Mr. Conroy gets it in the
Keep
next
going.
3 seconds, we can.
Keep going.
I'll take a motion.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Gibbons.
I make a motion to approve the trip to the Dunkin' Donuts Center in Providence, Rhode Island on February 15th. Second.
Okay. A motion's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
And it is a Providence Bruins.
It is Providence Bruins. Okay, there are some other activities there, but it is Providence Bruins. Well, that's excellent. That's a good opportunity. Next action item is the consideration to approve AAU Millis Pride waiver, a waiver by the AAU Millis Pride for building use. And the request is they're looking for, it looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, at least 8 games. This request comes from David, Coach Fallon. And are they looking for a complete?
Generally, there's a 50% waiver for all the
Is,
groups.
so it's not clear on that. Is that what they're looking for? Just to,
I believe so, yes.
okay. So this will be for a 50% reduction in facility rental fees. If and when there is a need for a custodian, they will pay for the custodians. We never waive that. This is in line with what we have done with other Millis-related programs. We have reduced fees up to 50%. Any questions, or if not, I would take a motion.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Conroy.
I make a motion that we approve the 50% reduction in fees for the Millis Pride AAU. They've asked for, I believe they're Wednesdays, starting in April through the end of May for practices.
Okay.
Second.
A motion's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Mr. Chair, can I just
Yes.
ask, somewhat related but not entirely. We have multiple camps that run in the summer, basketball camps, that at least one, if not 2 of them, utilize both the Clyde Brown gym and the high school gym.
Yes.
Will the new Clyde Brown be available to them next summer or not?
I think we'll have to check on that, but
Okay.
so we'll check at our Thursday meeting.
I think some of those camps run very early. They run
Beginning
like
of
the
July.
last, a
Yeah.
couple of years ago, one of them ran the last week in June, I thought.
Can I comment?
Yeah.
I do the facility count, I
Yeah.
don't know if you're aware of that. I've already told them that the Clyde Brown Gym will not be
Okay.
available during the summer, for a discussion with Mr. Engel.
Okay,
Oh,
excellent.
Thank
So
you,
we'll
Julie.
double check.
Yeah.
Double check.
Was John talking about, obviously, the old building, they're gonna start ripping it down, but was that the new Clyde
I think
Brown?
because they're gonna be moving stuff from one gym,
Yeah.
one school to the other, they
That
don't
makes
wanna
sense.
That makes sense, it does make sense,
Yeah.
but it can't hurt to, good bringing that up, can't hurt to check it, though. We took a vote on that, correct?
Yep.
Okay. Next, student rep.
So tomorrow, February 5th, February 6th, the Chem 2 class is having third graders from Clyde Brown come over to conduct experiments with them. And Mr. Kendrick's outdoor pursuits class is finishing up their cornhole boards, which they decided to make instead of the ice rinks this year.
That's it. Thank you, sir. Next up is time and learning. The curriculum director, Joan Lynn, is here. Joan, can we ask you to join us up front, please?
No,
Never.
no.
In your packet, you should have a memo.
We do.
In which I attempted to answer most of your questions that pertain to curriculum and sort of what drives the curriculum and how we make some decisions about things that have an impact on us. I think one of the questions that you had posed was sort of the impact on from the state, as far as what does the state change as far as curriculum is concerned and that impact. And I provided you with some information about things that have been happening. I think the biggest piece from the district perspective is that if you look from a middle school and a high school where you have content-specific teachers and content-specific PLCs, that impact certainly is important, but each department has their own area that they need to address with potential changes. But if you look at it from a K-5 perspective, where you have teachers teaching multiple courses or teaching all the courses, that's an impact that's pretty significant, because those changes come sometimes at rapid pace. And so an elementary teacher might be changing something in science while looking at social studies, while implementing something in math. And I think it's an area that we try to be very sensitive to support the elementary teachers, to make sure at no time does it become so overwhelming that there's just no breathing space for them. So I think that was important, and that was one of the pieces that I certainly wanted to explain. The other piece is that sometimes the impact on changes doesn't necessarily come from the state, it comes from internally. We look at something and decide we're not happy with the way something is going, or we have data to support we need to change something. And I think those are the pieces that sometimes impact things that aren't necessarily on our normal review cycle. And so that is something that we determine is a priority and therefore has to be addressed. So I think it's the combination of both of those things that has an impact on what's happening in the classroom as far as curriculum is concerned. Some of the questions, and please ask if there's something that comes to mind. But some of the questions that you were concerned about, or you were asking, had to do with sort of what are we currently funding or not funding with our budget the way it is. And I think one of the pieces that we struggle with is that there was a time when we purchased something and it had a shelf life. And that's my terminology, a shelf life. We buy a hardcover book and you probably get 7 to 10 years out of it. And now what's happening is that a lot of the things that we are finding best meet the needs of the students and the teachers in the teaching aspect of it are online subscriptions. And those don't have a shelf life. They come as an annual piece. So that has a great impact on the budget, because we don't have the ability to hold it out 2 or 3 years before we have to replace it. So online subscriptions those kind of challenges arise with our budget. And we've been trying to gather for the budget process, you know, what exactly are we using, what are we spending, where are we spending it, how are we doing that? Some of our online subscriptions have to do with diagnostic. We are looking for a quick screener for star reading and star math. That is a per pupil cost. There's also a little bit of a fee that the company charges for housing the data and stuff like that. But in the past, we might have done something that was paper that we could have run off. So those are things that we use to certainly assess the children quickly. And then the other pieces are more of the adaptive software that we use. How do we stretch their reading or their math so that they can practice skills on their level? So it's a combination of those pieces. Some of the programs that we use, I'm thinking of History Alive in our middle school, you needed to purchase the hard textbook in order to have the privilege of buying the subscription. So the publishers aren't crazy. They're not giving anything away. They kind of get you both. You know that this is not a standalone subscription. You need to have the textbook in order to make it work and make it make sense. So some of those things are what we kind of struggle with. What kind of things, new and changing things that we're doing with the program, more hands-on, certainly have the potential for costs associated with that. We've been very fortunate. Merit just funded us a great grant for us to be looking from a virtual reality perspective. You know, so sometimes we're able to subsidize with grants and with Merit. They've been very generous with giving us some things that we're able to do that we might not have been able to do otherwise. As far as the types of programs that we possibly aren't offering that we'd like to offer, our probably biggest challenge is the electives that we can offer our students. Our class sizes, there's not an awful lot of students that might be interested in something, where if you had a bigger population, you could have just more kids that wanted to take something. So we have the privilege of offering our kids online courses. They can take it through VHS or they can take it through tech, and our budget supports that. But at the same time, that doesn't give us the opportunity for hands-on if you're taking an online course, and it doesn't give the opportunity for face-to-face so that you could then interact with the teacher or to have a class. So, I mean, I think we do a great job of getting kids the content, but, you know, if we had more opportunities, that face-to-face might be a better opportunity for us to offer electives.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
At the higher education level, there are some places that offer strictly online courses, but then there's a lot of hybrid courses where you do a lot of online work, and then once every 6 weeks or whatever, once every 5 weeks, you go in for a 2-day, sometimes over the weekend, you know, kind of 2 long classes. Sometimes they'll do every other week they show. Have any of at the high school level, have they started looking at hybrid
So
situations?
the tech, the Education Collaborative online courses that we've been offering for the last 6 or 7 years, what they attempted to do was just that, to say, these are even, you know, they're on the young side to be doing strictly online and not having that interaction. So what they tried to do was to have at least once, if not twice, during that course run of that semester, was to have an opportunity to invite kids. They didn't all get to go because it might have been something that was at night, because they're coming from 12 different school districts in Massachusetts. So the opportunity, we had some teachers in Millis staff members who were teaching them, and they hosted that here for those students to come together and even just meet, like, oh, you're the person who's looking for me to do the assignments, and to be able to do that. The VHS is a nationwide program, so you might have a professor through VHS that's in Utah or Oregon. They're not going to be able to do that, but they try to do a lot with either Skyping or to be able to make connections with the kids. But I think that was the exact purpose, was to connect.
Are they still doing it at tech, or is it?
I think they are. I can't tell you that I know that our teachers are. We have somebody on staff this semester who's teaching it. But there was somebody, right? Exactly. So, but that was their purpose, was to be able to pull people together, even if it was more social, so that you got to make that relationship together with that teacher. So we are able to offer kids opportunities. Sometimes it's extracurricular. I think of the Fun Lab next door at Clyde Brown, where people get to do those things, but they do it, you know, for a fee, and they do it after school. Some of the things here, we're doing the Global and STEM Scholars at the high school. You know, how do we begin to structure some of that? So I think we try really hard to offer opportunities for kids, and often we have the courses ready to go, but then there's no enrollment, so they kind of, they just don't run for that semester. So I think those are some of the pieces. The other question too is, had to do with more for preparing students that maybe were not making the decision to go on to college. And I think the state's been pretty clear that we look to have a 21st century student that is college or career ready. So I think the idea of the skill sets that we're working on in our curriculum are gearing towards that. And I think Millis here has, we've spent a lot of time over the last couple of years looking at career and college ready. We've had the opportunity to create our 21st century career position. Amy Day is the person here at the high school, and I know she was so pumped to get going and start doing those reach outs that I know right now she's working on internships or the potential for internships with the Millis Police, the fire department, EMTs. So areas that we can make connections for kids while they're still in high school, and then the ability for them, and that's not to say she doesn't have other internships, I just know she's working on those particular ones right now. And I know she works with Mark Dickey and Riley Dunn in our guidance department to continue to work on reach out for kids. Because not all kids will go to college, but we want to make sure that once they walk out of our doors, that they're ready to handle the world out there. So I think Bob had written a memo in December that had to do with the Tri-County and the Aggie. He had questions about kids leaving to go to those areas, so those schools. I think it's an interest in vocations, and it's, you know, that's definitely a part of why kids are going there. But I can get you that another copy of that if you need it.
So, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, also included in your memo is some data that we had about Spanish immersion, because that had been one of the questions. There's a lot of columns in that chart, but I'm happy if it's unclear as to what sort of each of the columns refer to.
Yeah, Joan, can we just walk through?
Sure.
Just
Like the whole chart?
no, more just if we just take one grid, because I was just trying to follow the math through. So
Okay, sure. Do you want to do the current grade?
I was going to do the school year 11, 12, the grade.
Okay,
8.
sure. Mm-hmm.
So cohort, there were 115 kids when they were in kindergarten.
Mhm.
We offered 28 Spanish immersion slots.
Yes.
7 initially declined.
Mm-hmm.
19 were waitlisted. 4 of those never got on. 15 got in. So
Actually, 4 were offered. They declined, so 4 were offered.
okay,
So of the 19 that were waitlisted,
15.
4 were asked and they said no.
Okay.
Then 15 got in. So 15 plus 4 equals the 19.
Yep.
Okay, and then if you go all the way over to the far side, so ultimately there were none left on the wait list because they were either given the opportunity to come in or they declined.
So that means we ultimately had 28 plus 15. So we ultimately had at one point 43 kids in the class, maybe down to 40.
No, I believe we had the availability of 28, but I believe they had, yes, so there, that many, I believe so, yes.
Actually, I think what's missing is how many were in the lottery each year.
Yes.
That column.
Well, if there were 28 slots, 19 got waitlisted. So I would say, so 47 were in the lottery. So we offered, so if we had 47 and we offered, so I guess the question, so there were 28 slots, 7 initially declined, okay? So then were 7 of the 15, that initial 15?
It's Mr. Phelps's chart, I'm sorry.
That's
Yes,
I'm
I just don't
trying to-
know it well
because-
enough.
Because as I walk through that, it seems like, knowing we only have one class, that we were running 30 to 40 kids in one classroom at some point in time. That's what I'm just trying.
I don't think that's,
I don't think,
Yeah.
That sounds like a
Right,
lot, but
right.
but I'm trying to figure out if
Can-
we had 28 slots, we had 15 kids get off the wait list. That's 43 right there.
Well, I
Only
think-
two
I
kids
think
dropped
They got
out.
out the wait list because so 28 slots, 7 initially declined, so you're down to 21. So then you took 7 off of the 19.
accepted.
Right.
right, that's what's missing.
So we're missing two. We're missing-
I would
So that
say
gives you-
three, I would say you're missing 3 columns. One where
Well-
students that dropped out.
Well, attrition is 2.
But attrition is after you get set to everybody is all set, like attrition.
They come
is
out after the
after
class
the
starts.
So after you've gone through all of this.
So it might be
at the
better
end of
to
the
do-
school year.
Well, then I would say
Two
then,
didn't go on to the next.
well then, if we had
Right.
28 minus 7,
Right, you're at
So that-
21.
but then we had another, right, so of the
21
15
and
who got
15,
on,
36.
28, right, so you at least had 36.
Right.
Well,
I
no, because
do-
4 of them,
Which is what I
4 of
think
them
happens.
minus
Gotta go.
4.
But I think.
We'll eventually come to
Yeah,
some sort of
so-
number, just,
So we'll
Just
get
sit
from
here.
Just
Jason,
watch.
but I think from
I do it all the time.
my understanding of it is 36 at some point, but I don't think it was ever 36, because the waitlist students get offered as students in the classroom come out, even after the declines. The attrition, the way that the attrition is calculated, is not calc through this process. Attrition is, I'm set at 78 at the end of the year, and now I move on to the next year. So how many have left since the very beginning? That's how they calculate.
Then how do we have one
So then
in
you only
attrition
have-
for the first grade when this is their first year?
They've already come out.
Oh, they went in and
But
came
if
out.
you've only lost 2 kids from the original 28,
Not the original 28, the 28 as they were set at the end of their first year, not the original 28. So the original 28, after all of these moves have been made, after people
So that
accept to
attrition
go
is
into
year,
class.
that's
so
present
that-
day.
so really let's
That's not
just
attrition at the
stipulate
end
there
of the
were,
year.
if we were gonna say there were
Present.
maybe at max 32 kids.
Some number, 36 at max.
Well,
Like
that,
full
so,
max.
so that, well, that's kind of my, so we
But I don't
set.
think it goes that way.
But I guess that's, obviously, we can ask Mr.
I
Phelps
do
for
have
question.
all of the information for this year's. I've got every kid accounted for on my cheat sheet, so
No.
I
Yeah,
can,
let's talk about this year.
I can
So
do
is that-
18,
is that
19.
What are the
18,
parentheses
19 down at the
18,
bottom?
19, yes.
Okay.
I can do that.
Okay.
Okay, you ready?
Mhm, ready.
Okay. There were 100 students in the kindergarten class. 46 of them applied to be in the lottery. Of the 46, 4 withdrew. So they withdrew before they actually had their name picked, so we were down to 42.
Okay, there's my.
So that's the
42.
pool.
So
That's
that's
the pool.
That was
26
the pool
plus
of
the,
students.
which
Correct.
equals the 26 plus the students waitlisted of 16, gives you 42.
Right.
So can I just stop you there? My son was number 19 on the wait list.
Yep.
So that's not, so their student wait list at 16 is incorrect.
No, it's correct. I still have 7 more columns to explain to you before we get there.
Okay.
All right? So then, there were 20 on the wait
They're not
list.
doing it at periods of time.
Okay.
So there were 20 on the wait list
Yeah.
at that point. We
Okay.
picked the kids that were in the class, 26 were picked. 1 was removed because they decided they wanted to be, and 4 immediately, of the 20 on the wait list. So the kids are picked, they're in
Yeah,
the
so we got
classroom.
26.
26 in the
26
class.
picked.
Yep.
26, there's 20 left.
Yep,
Yep,
1 was removed at a parent request, so we're down to 19.
yep.
okay.
4 were offered and said no, because we had the others withdraw from the, from there. That
Right,
left
so
15.
26 were offered.
Yep,
4
and then
said no.
4 said no?
4
of the
said no.
26? Okay.
that left 20 on the wait list. 1 removed themselves from the list, said nope, we don't want to be on the list
So
anymore.
we got 19.
Then we got 4 that said they were offered, the 4 that were open, and they said no, thank you. That left 15 on the wait list.
Yep.
Since the start in September, 1 child came out, which then left us an opening. 2 were offered it and declined, said thank you but no thank you, and 1 went in to replace the one that came out. So as of January of 2019, there are 12 people still on the wait list. So those are the numbers that get to those pieces. So the fact that your child was number 19 on that particular day, last April when it was called, still doesn't necessarily mean that there are 18 in front of him. There's a total of 12 kids this year that were on the wait list.
Can we update this chart with at least add applied? That just, I mean, that's not relevant to the bottom line number, but at least shows you,
Applied for the lottery, that's the.
yeah, it shows you the progression. You know, applied, how many slots were offered. And then I guess number of slots initially declined is withdrew. You called it.
Yeah.
You said withdrew, so we can call it declined, withdrawn, whatever. What, is there any, you said there was another column we should add.
I guess what I was trying to figure out, and maybe it's easier if we just, I just want to know how many kids were in the Spanish immersion class each year from the time they, because I'm struggling to get with the grade 8, I'm struggling to see how there wasn't 35 kids in there at some point.
I can ask that question.
And if we had, and I haven't gone through the other rows yet, but I guess, and then just kind of, if we had that many kids, but we, kind of, what do we, because we set caps at 28, if we're bumping to 35, just kind of.
That's Jack's class. There were never 35 kids. Because I used to.
There were never 35.
I went in there and volunteered. I want to say there was 26. Or maybe 27.
So then that's just, so then it's part of, but what, so that's fine. And it's just a function of, there's hidden attrition in here somewhere that I can't see. Because.
Offers and declines.
Right, like, more than 2 kids from the original 28 moved out of it in order for
Right.
15
Exactly.
kids to be able to come in.
Yeah.
What happens to those 12 kids this year
What happens
that
to
are on
them?
the wait list?
They're still
Like,
on the.
They're still on a wait list?
Until when?
Well, actually, through first grade and into second grade.
So they could switch in 12th and second grade?
Only
If,
if
if
If they
the,
can show that they have an understanding of Spanish at that point. So, you know, if parents, and again, Mr. Phelps could speak more to this than I can, but, you know, do they understand Spanish? Have parents been offering their kids the opportunity to learn Spanish? Do they have some knowledge of Spanish so that they can go in where they're starting? Because they're not starting back at square one.
You know what else would be kind of interesting, and just to throw, if we're constantly having 40 plus kids apply for the lottery, I'm wondering how many, you know, if people are declining as slots come out. Is it because school's already started and they feel like they can't keep, like, because, so I know, so my son's probably the last one on the list, but if something were to pop up this year, we would probably decline because I'd feel like he'd be too far behind. So are we missing kids that, you know, that parents are still, would have been interested in, and I guess what I'm saying is, at what point do we look at, you know, the possibility of adding a second class if the interest is there and we're constantly getting 40 plus people that are interested? And I know that we have to then plan for year 2 and year 3, year 4, but if we start to see a pattern of, you know, 9 kids still on a wait list, 12 kids still on the wait list, at what, you know, is there some point that we look at this? Does it make sense if, you know, if people are coming into Millis, as part of it is because we offer this great program? Is there a possibility, or it hasn't been talked about, at what point do we look at that?
Yeah, because that was the second question. There were 2 Spanish immersion
Yep.
questions. One was how many students have applied each year for the last 5 years? You gave us more than 5. How many people have been on the wait list for each of those last 5 years? How many students drop out each year in that first year? To get to Mark's question.
Right, 'cause
The second question was Spanish immersion related. Has anyone looked into expanding the Spanish immersion program to more than its current 1 class per grade level, which is what Carrie's getting at? So it's really not enough just if, and we don't know what the amount of applied, but just using that first, or the 8th group this year, the 18-19 year, 46. So it's just shy of the typical class, right? Where most classes are 24, 25, but it's not that far off. It just becomes a question of, do we have enough to support that? Do we have enough, do we have enough money to train teachers?
Well, and would you have enough to support it? Because if over the course of time, with the
People drop.
exception of current grade 4, everyone who is on the wait list either declined or got on the wait
Right.
list, means if you start with 2 grades in 2 classes in first grade and you have to plan for it, but then all of a sudden you get to 4th grade and there's not enough.
Or
Again,
maybe-
there's hidden information in here and but it almost seems like whether it's because people get offered and they decline because it's end of year 1 or year 2.
Right, right.
But there's also a decent number of kids over time that drop out.
Well, if you look at our
That
current
we don't
third
have,
grade.
that we wouldn't be able to support 40 all the way
No,
through.
No, but maybe you don't have to support 40 the whole way through. Maybe you're supporting 40 in the first 2 to 3 years.
I think the other piece too is our current third grade, we had 8 kids come out for various reasons over the last 2 years. And so the third grade class is a class size of 18. So it started out as 26, 8 of them came out. So I think it gets to sort of your point about there are times where it just isn't a match. And so therefore, students do come out.
Or they move.
Or they move. They could move out of our town as well. So I think the piece is in FY, school year 15-16, we had students still on the wait list. We had 9 of them. And in the current year, we have 12 of them. But in all of the other years, the students that wanted to get in, or there was nobody left on the wait list for us to offer those opportunities. So sporadically, some grade levels, at different times, we've got 2 examples here. But when you're looking at those numbers, we have our grade 6 at 20. So there were 8 students that came out at that as well. So, and the other thing that has an impact is the class size. If we're only starting with our kindergarten at 84,
Right.
this particular year there were 100. But, if we're starting with 84, I think that has an impact on the number of people who might be interested.
Can I ask one more question? With the current kindergarten class being a larger one, why did we stop at 26? Why didn't we offer the full 28?
There was actually a school
policy
committee
change.
decision that made a
Oh.
policy change.
Our fault.
And it had to do with the large class size
Sure,
in
yep.
Spanish immersion, when the other class sizes in grade 1
Were
were
lower.
much smaller.
Got it.
Do you give the families information about how to keep their kids up with, because I'm one of the parents on the wait list and I have received nothing to be teaching my kids in Spanish.
I think that there was some pieces that went out. Did you go to
We
the?
received nothing.
I can't speak to that.
I know, I'm just informing you.
Right, but I know that when people were called on the phone, there were conversations that were had between Mr. Phelps and it was Mrs. Malloy this time. So I know there was conversations that happened on the phone. I can't speak to that.
We can resend that,
We can-
that
yep.
information.
Thank you.
So,
I did only get one question of one column. Somebody at some point said there were 3 columns they wanted added,
I
but I
thought
only
you
got
said there
one.
should be, I thought you suggested a column. One applied, so one is
Who
the,
applied.
how many people applied?
Yeah.
And you,
Mark, did you have 3?
Well, I don't know how many, I just,
What's missing?
when I'm looking at the table, I'm trying to,
Go across.
I should see, right, like all the pieces of the puzzle, so that, like, what I'm gathering from this conversation is what I would consider attrition is significantly higher than 2
For that
for
class
that
we were
top
looking
grade.
at.
Because I would say the attrition should be every kid who dropped out from first grade through whatever grade they're in now. Because otherwise, because the number of attritions should equal the number of waiting list spots that became available.
so is that
Absent-
attrition column at the end of the year, the end of that one school year? Or is
Once
that-
the class starts. So once the class
So
starts.
that's, so two in grade 8 have dropped out, they could have dropped out over the course of, in
Yes,
5th grade?
Mhm.
4th grade, it's not that first year?
But that,
correct.
But that can't be, otherwise there's 43 kids in the class.
There's 0 people on the wait list and there was 15 students from the wait list accepted, so that can't be.
Unless
that's
there were,
what- that's what
unless there
school
were
asked
35
us.
to 40 kids in the class,
No.
more than
There
two
wasn't.
kids.
I know
more
it's a
than two
fair
kids
question, but I
dropped
can
out.
attest there was not.
I think
I
it's
will
just a
ask-
terminology thing, yeah.
The attrition piece is definitely from the once the class starts. At some point, the student comes out. That's not the decline, or they decline to enter the class because it was offered to them. And so, but I can ask Mr. Phelps to see if we can get some more information and get that back to you. Is that okay?
Yeah.
And, go ahead, Nancy.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, yes.
One of the considerations always is the quality of attracting qualified, native fluency, skilled in pedagogy teachers. And that's always been, I was in Mendon Upton 20 years ago, 20-something years ago, when we started our immersion program then, that my own children are now the beneficiaries of. And in the early years, very, very rocky in terms of staffing. I wasn't here in Millis, but we used Millis. Millis had been running their immersion program for about 3 years when we started up the one in Mendon Upton. And so staffing is always the challenge. And once we have phenomenal staff now, and it's solid, but if you were to add so that practically half of your school was immersion, and add a teacher in every grade level, it has to be done during a time of increasing enrollment when you start a program like this or add to it, because otherwise you're laying off an English-speaking teacher to hire a Spanish-speaking teacher.
Sure.
So quality staff is always the real challenge, and we're very fortunate here in Millis to have some great teachers. But I keep, we have a yearly conference that the Spanish government sponsors, and at the Cervantes Institute, and sponsored. So we network with other immersion programs and stay up to date and get a lot of good information, and it's a challenge for everyone.
So Joan,
So, go ahead.
go ahead, you have more stuff, because I have a couple
I just
questions.
have, it's really one big thing. The other questions that I haven't gotten to yet had to do with the actual money and the costs.
You read my mind.
And so I would
Like a
tell.
good teacher.
Trying to figure it out. Terry is here, but I would tell you from a perspective of looking at what we actually spend for curriculum, it's a challenge to figure that out. Because what might be considered classroom supplies in some rooms are curriculum supplies in others. For example, paint. Paint in the art room is a curriculum supply. Paint in first grade might be just some fun activities. So they're not always cut and dry. I can probably tell you exactly how much I spent for textbooks. I can tell you, those kinds of expenditures. But the question about how much do we spend on curriculum materials is not easy to figure that out.
So when we were, I will speak for the group, when we were going through these questions, I don't think we were getting that granular, like around paints.
Okay.
Like, I know, we understand that there's supplies, and I'm not being dismissive, that's
Yeah.
a great point, because we were not thinking about that. We were thinking about, because I remember some of the conversation, it was textbooks, it was
Curriculum
subscriptions.
subscriptions, yeah.
It was periodicals, like kind of probably what you would consider kind of the traditional curriculum materials, understanding that a lot of that is now online.
Right.
And, so I would not put tablets in there, that's technology, but
Right.
what do we need to put on those tablets?
Yes.
And is that technology, is it apps, or is that curriculum? So we're not looking for, we're never gonna get a perfect number, because there is something to be, it can be subjective at times, but we wanna look at the big picture, because I will speak for myself. I've been on the committee now I'm going into my 9th year. I think we probably don't spend enough money on curriculum. So that was part of the, not that if you said, we need to spend 100 grand, we can find 100 grand, but this is part of this whole process. You probably saw all of the questions around all of the cost centers, is we're trying to set ourselves up as a committee, working with the admin team on what do we need to do, and what are some of the strategic decisions we need to make budget-wise over the next several years. So we know you get by, we know you get through, and you guys grab here and grab there and get, parents will donate who work for companies will donate technology for a certain amount of time or licensing. So that's fine, and that's how we do it, but from a higher level, we need to figure out, because the exact question is, how much do we spend on curriculum, which is difficult. And then the second part of that question, which I think is probably more important, is how much should we be spending? And we have current, preferred, and ideal. We're probably never going to get to the ideal.
Yeah.
What's in the middle?
So what I did do was that I went to each of the three principals and had conversations with them around specifically 2 line items. One line item was their textbook line item, and the second line item was curriculum materials and supplies, instructional materials and supplies. Those were the 2 line items that I went to for each one of them. We do have, one of your other questions was about departments, and so the principals have those as sort of their bigger accounts that they oversee, obviously. But there are some unified arts that have a small line item,
Sure.
a couple $1,000s or something like that, where they have control specifically for, and it does seem to fall on unified arts. The technology, Dave D's technology course has a line item that's separate from Jen Starr's technology department. But overall, in looking at that and having the conversations with the 3 principals, it was really looking at those 2 line items in particular. And they felt that they had gone through and exhausted those before they then looked at maybe end of the year spending, that sometimes we have the benefit of doing that. But that was in the neighborhood for the 3 schools of $144,000.
So right now, we are spending between the 3 schools for textbooks and instructional materials, $144,000.
Correct.
And what, do you have any idea, and you may not, do you have any idea what that number should be? Or could be? And it could change from year to year, but what do you think? Is 144 sufficient?
No, it's not. And the
Okay.
reason I say that is that we have had the benefit every year of either having a line item,
End
a
of year
warrant
savings.
item, and the end of the year savings. So the end.
So that 144 does not include the warrant?
Correct,
Okay.
that does not. So if there was a warrant item for a particular area that we were looking at, the warrant item has always typically been in the $45,000 to $60,000 range when we've had that as a go-to. And then the other piece is that when we do have end-of-the-year savings, we've been very fortunate and blessed that the curriculum materials have always come to the top as what do you need first in the classroom and in the hands of kids. And I would tell you that that range has been also in that $40,000 to $60,000 over the last couple of years that we can also add to that. So when we're looking at these numbers, you know, what's the sort of the have-tos, the nice-tos, and what do you really want? Closer to 200 is probably a much closer look at what we need to be spending, and we've been scraping together in various places. I brought up before merit. That merit $50,000 was, that's a nice piece that we would have loved to explore that under our own budget. How can we do these kinds of things? But it was a gift for us to be able to do that and not have to make a decision of what goes in order to have that as our option. I'm talking about the virtual, the lab.
So part of this is the first year with Terry as the business manager. This is the first year that this committee has gone through this level of detail and asking questions. We've always asked the question of what should we be spending, but I think we're being a little more thoughtful about it and putting a lot of work on the admin team. But going forward in next year's budget, in FY21, that's the number maybe we start with. We need to put it all on the table. It's not all going to last, but we need to find $200,000 for curriculum, right? We have 140 right now. Can we find 60 in the operating budget, or is it strictly, do we have to increase our warrants? So, but this is the benefit of this exercise. That's the number we need, because we've gotten to that number, starts and stops, but that's the number we should have constantly, right?
Mr. Chair?
And I just wanted to add one more category of what we would like to be funding, and that's much more of the adaptive software for more enrichment and challenge, as well as support. There's some phenomenal products out there that we keep abreast of and evaluate. Dreambox Math is something, Edgenuity. These are all things that, if we could afford it, would assist our teachers so that the teacher's not having to be the person differentiating everything. There could be a center in the room that kids rotate through that's, they often include a diagnostic. What do you need? What are the skills? What's missing? And then if kids are beyond certain things, they can soar as far as they can go. And it never replaces the teacher, but it's a very nice way to challenge kids that need and are desiring that challenge.
So before we go on to Mark, the one thing I would say to that comment is we need to, as a committee and as an admin team, we need to stop thinking if we could afford it. We need to afford it, right? And so how can we let's exhaust all possibilities, and if that's something we need, we have to try to do it. We may not be able to get there, but I think we have to change our mindset, not just you, everyone, is that if that's something we need and that's truly going to help student learning, and especially maybe even a targeted population, then we need to do whatever we can to find the money to do that.
And just to give you a kind of some frame of mind, one of those products that Nancy just mentioned is $33 per student per year. So when we start taking that out and multiplying it by 100 or 200, we're talking significant,
Sure.
Big bucks for that. So we're doing it on the cheap, on the what other products are out there that can do similar things. But again, you don't always need the top of the line, but you want to make sure that what you are getting is quality as well as doing what it's expected to do.
Mr. Conway, I'm sorry.
Well, and John brought it up again. I think part of it and part of the significant discussion also needs to be that curriculum materials are not any longer just books that you can put on a rotation schedule like vans or
Right.
even laptops and Chromebooks and iPads that, putting the $40,000 to $60,000 warrant article up at town meeting, and if you don't get it, this idea of, okay, well then you're just holding your set of books for another year and you go back at it. If we're really talking about subscriptions, it's this idea of kind of going along in the same vein as when we talked about when we first rolled out the iPads. We're doing this in perpetuity. It's an annual expense, regardless of where it comes from. This isn't we go out and buy 100 subscriptions at $300 or $33, and next year we don't because the warrant article didn't pass.
Right.
So we also need to move it to recurring sources of funding, not
Right. But that is
availability
something
at
we
town
also,
meeting.
a few years ago, remember we changed the language in what the warrant article said? Didn't we have to, didn't we have to make a change because that year we were buying subscription services and the initial
Yes, we
language was
did.
more about textbooks?
Yes.
Like they were
But
hard.
even that's one-time money.
No, I get that.
That we
But that is a changing, but
Right.
I agree with you, is that it's great that we do it at the end of the year. We should never turn down that end, you're never gonna turn money back ever.
Right.
And it's great that we can do that, but it should be more consistent. We
Right.
shouldn't be skimping on the curriculum.
Right, exactly. And we've had this conversation before, and it's sort of like,
Numerous.
where do you get it from kind of stuff within your budget? But I think that's it. We've been blessed with the times that they have funded something on the town meeting floor, but at other times, we're like, okay, so now what do we do? Or we just pause and, wait until we figure it all out.
But to Mr. Conway's
So-
point is that it's great,
Absolutely.
but it's not, as much as we think it's consistent, it's never guaranteed unless you get into that 3-year lease
Right.
or that 3-year buying program. I'm sorry, any questions or comments on This side?
I just had a question. So if this $33 a kid program is like amazing and we think it's gonna be great, like, could we charge the kids $33 a year?
Not
I
if
would be
you're,
adamantly opposed to doing that.
I don't know.
I don't
No,
think legally you
and-
can.
We actually
You-
went
you
through
actually-
this with the, we went through this
you
with the
actually-
iPads.
iPads.
You can't.
Legally.
Legally, you can't
If
charge
it's
for
part
something
of
that they.
their, if it's, I forget what the language was, but
Part of their public education.
when it's
Yeah.
part of their public, we can't charge them for that.
Free and
So we did that
appropriate.
with we looked at that at the iPads and we got an answer that legally we couldn't even do it, so
Yeah. Okay.
that took it right off the
Yeah,
table.
no, that's fine. I was just asking.
Nope,
Yeah.
it's fair.
Free and appropriate, free and
Yeah.
appropriate
That's right.
education, so. I do think one last piece, and then I'll stop talking. I think the other piece that isn't really part of stuff is we have not been able to fund teacher professional development, curriculum development stuff in the summer that we have had years ago. And part of that is that, teachers work really hard and they work their fingers to the bone for 180 days while kids are with them. But yet then they are working at home, they're working, they're getting ready for the following year. And I think the best work comes from when we can support that and have the dialogue together. And so that it's not everybody working on their own, but to honor that work that they're doing and to make sure that we can then continue to enhance the instruction that's happening in their classrooms when they are physically here. So
I believe in our working session documents, there was some mention of summer professional development.
Mhm.
So I'm assuming that's what,
yes.
that's what,
Mhm.
okay.
Yeah,
that's
but I just wanted to.
No, no.
No.
That was development of summer programs.
Oh, sorry, that's for kids.
For
This,
kids.
in the work thing, that was for the kids. What are we doing for students?
Okay.
This
Well-
would be teachers.
And we are gonna have a meeting, a joint meeting with the admins, a working session
Yes.
at some point, so
Yeah.
we can talk about that if it's nowhere on any of the
Right.
lists that we're gonna review.
And one of
Would
the
be in
warrants.
ideal state.
Yeah, one of the warrants that you had mentioned before when we had to change the wording of that because it was subscriptions, also contained a figure of part of that went to summer development for teachers.
I think you're right. Yeah,
So,
I don't think you're right.
So I think that was part of it as well, that we were able to put that in and fund it that way.
Okay. Any other, Denise, any question? Mark, you good?
No, yeah.
Anyone else? Joan, thank you.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. So that's the one number we need, is that right now, for just this initial, that 200, that's 144 is pretty much in the budget right
Yes.
now.
Mhm.
That extra 40 to 60, depending on the year, is what we need to, that's the delta.
That is.
Wait, so you said the extra 40 to 60 was from the warrant?
We've
And-
done some warrants.
We've done some warrants in
And then you
past-
said there was a second 40 to 60 that we used. What was that from?
We haven't had the warrants for the last couple of years because they weren't funded, so we were able to fund around that same amount of money with end-of-the-year savings.
End of the year savings. Okay,
So-
that's fine. I just wanted to make that.
But that didn't include summer curriculum development necessarily, or the enrichment challenge piece for students who need it. So I would say it's probably closer to 250 total if we include summer curriculum development time as well as the software that's adaptive and can
Yes.
challenge kids as well as support struggling learners. So call it 250.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
so are we at 200 for the preferred and 250 for the ideal?
Mhm.
Thank you. That-
Thanks to wrap that right up there.
You were late to the meeting, but now you've made up for that. You're at a 3.5 right now.
Am I good?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Joan.
0.5.
There will be .5s eventually.
Some classes.
All right.
Discussion
Thank you,
for
Joan.
another day.
That was our time and learning. Superintendent's report. You have a budget update, a capital project update, we're going into a working session, should we?
Right, we'll defer the budget. We do need to speak to capital, but I was just going to give a quick update on the building project before.
Yes.
As Terry's coming on up. We're a little over 60% done with the project. They were behind about a week and now they're back on time. The windows are mostly done. The casings, there was a little bit of slowdown with some of those. They're back on track. They are doing the ceramic tiling, and the grids and the ceilings are going in. The roof is pretty much almost done, with some of the trim work starting. Plumbing was again behind a tiny bit, but they've caught up. And the first week of February, they were supposed to get the boilers in. I don't know if they went in, and Eversource was scheduled to turn on permanent power. So that was all in this time frame. This week, finishes are going in on the interior and A&M ceilings, and they were testing for water and air tightness. So we have a Thursday meeting every Thursday that will get some updates, and March is going to be when the phones and fiber go in. Terry, is there anything you can think of to add to that?
No, I think there's just a lot of stuff going on. I think you've given a great update on the physical plant. Obviously, we're moving forward with a lot of different transition issues. We're right now filling out some detailed work that needs to be done to get the phones, because there's about a 3-month process to get that process going. We're talking, in fact, tomorrow we'll be having a transition meeting on the move. Jason, I always pronounce her name wrong.
Elise Malloy.
Elise Malloy, thank you, who's been a godsend in really helping with organizing some of the things for us. So she's been a great help, and John and myself, because that is fast coming upon us, and to remove some of the angst of staff, we've found that to nail down some of the details for all of the staff earlier is better than later. But I think we've lined up the mover, I think we've lined up the recycler, and how that process will all work. You folks, of course, at your last meeting voted to allow me to go through the process of beginning the disposal process of the annex. That's significant and helpful. So a lot of different things moving forward.
Oh, and the last thing, just today they verified that there is actually a time capsule in.
Oh, yes.
They moved the cornerstone. It's there. It exists. They are now keeping it in there and sealing it back up until the ceremony, which will be early March, so that it's safe.
That is really cool.
Yeah. And,
So we are going to-
There will be a 2-level ceremony, we believe, one for the kids, and then a more adult-focused one, perhaps, of actually opening the box and examining the documents that are in there, et cetera. So, but we're definitely, Mr. Phelps and his school site council are planning those, and everybody's very excited.
We're going to tape both of those, right?
Yeah, I'm
We should
sure.
tape those.
Good idea.
I don't think they call it taping anymore.
Yes, I think we're taping right now. What do they call it?
They're not using tape.
There's no tape involved.
What do we call it?
You have to ask
You're quick to
professionals.
No, you're quick to correct. I'd like to know that we are in a school environment.
We're recording it.
We're recording.
recording it.
I played a recorder in 3rd grade.
Recording, yeah.
It's just not tape recording?
showing
Is
your
it-
age.
All we're
It's
doing
not
is
tape.
dropping the tape?
Dave, so you are running VHS tape in there right now? Thank you. He's old school. You gotta correct me on the
Is that where we're going
recording.
next? Okay.
I think so.
Could we have some sort of camera device with some sort of memory take pictures of the time capsule? Then we'll put a VHS
can arrange
tape
that.
in the new
In
one.
the new time capsule, yeah.
Well, that is good that they actually found something. And it would be nice for them to find the one in front of Memorial Building. That's what they
Can't
were
we get
talking.
like one of those sonar things? Like I watch
What
stuff
about a
on
metal
History
detector?
Channel that has like you can like take pictures 60 feet down. Can't we just get one of those?
That
Go
seems
for it, Karen.
expensive.
Those radars,
60 feet
I'll see what I can do, Nancy.
How about 3 feet?
It's like you're
Not
looking for
searching Jimmy
dinosaur
Hoffa's
bones.
grave.
And they've been on that island, Skull Island, for 3 years. and
that's
they've
what
never,
I'm talking
yeah,
about,
it's not called,
Skull
it's not, I think it is called. And they've never found anything.
They will.
Did you read the book? Did you read the book?
Well, this meeting has degenerated to a discussion of Friday night Discovery Channel TV. We want to talk about the
Capital planning.
capital
first.
planning. You
So-
moved it around a little bit.
Nice and
Yeah,
organized,
we-
thank
We
you.
revised this, added, I think, a couple of lines that were recommended at the last meeting, sorted it in the order, I think, that was recommended by the committee. And I actually added some lines there to kind of segregate between the high, low still comes up in the middle, unfortunately, because of the alphabetical sorting as far as the priority goes, but the high, low, medium, and then the removals all come at the bottom. So the first two items on the list are existing warrant articles that you've had in the past that need to be continually funded, the bus lease, of course, that you adopted last year, and the Medicaid administration, which is $5,000 each year, and of course that has a dramatic return on revenue by getting the Medicaid revenue. And then the next item is also a must fund. The two items together basically make up the computer lease. So that's why you see those two items next as number one. And then number two is the $100,000 engineering study that we discussed at the last meeting for the roof and the HVAC. Then I believe number three becomes curriculum materials, number four lockers, number five furniture, number six grade 9 Chromebooks, number 7 the wireless network, number 8 the scoreboard, number 9 drinking fountain protection, and number 10 uninterruptible power supplies, and those make up the high priorities for 2020 as we have defined them. Now that doesn't mean you folks can't re-rank those.
Terry, just from a visual standpoint, can we move the 10-year total to the end? Because when I first started looking at this sheet, and I'm probably not the only one that's going to do that at some point, you see the 10-year total, and if you look at it quick, that looks like that's the. Go ahead.
Well, I have to, this is not my spreadsheet.
Oh, is this, they told you this is the format?
This is the format given to me.
In that order?
Yes, so.
Okay,
So,
never mind then.
yeah, no, so even when I insert the things that we've inserted, I'm kind of playing with somebody else's toy here.
Well,
So,
we're just making it better.
Hey, that's
Thank
my
you.
spreadsheet.
Is this your sheet?
Can you
Spend-
change it? Steve wants you to change it.
so.
This is your, this is.
Well, it
oh,
was originally, and then it's been, but yes, it was originally my
Yeah,
spreadsheet.
because for example,
awesome.
if you'll note the orange at the top, none of those totals are formulas. Those are all hard numbers that were added up, so that's why I made the note that once I started to do things in here, those totals don't necessarily add up anymore. So
Then
that's
why-
why I made you'll see the little note there that says totals may not be correct.
I think because he was trying to take a snippet of
Right.
I don't think that pertains to just the school, it was for the overall,
Yeah,
and it just
and
filtered
that's
out,
why I
so.
just, because I just wanted to qualify this, because again, it's not my toy, but what we were trying to do is show what our priorities were as a department.
Listen, I don't mind the sheet. I was just trying to look at it from a standpoint of ease of reading.
Don't try to like dig
Now you're
yourself
going.
out
Now you're going
Steve.
back.
I do a lot of things. Backpedaling is not one of them. Maybe I should.
I would add, Mr. Chairman, that when it first came to me, for example, you would have seen multiple lines that said computer replacement. And I added in clarification as to what computer replacement those were.
Where, what number?
Well, for example, you would have said computer replacement, and I added in whether it was, for example, the grade 9 Chromebooks.
Oh, I see.
Or, in other words, whatever it was. So, again, and I'm not being critical, I'm simply saying that there's only so much playing I could do with somebody else's,
Carry sheet, I got it.
yeah.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Yeah.
Actually, on that computer replacement. So on the computer replacement for the grade 9 Chromebooks,
Yes.
Am I recalling correctly, or do we have the grade 9 Chromebook replacement as part of our operating budget?
Yes, you
It
do.
has been, yes.
Okay, so
Then why is it
it on the
here?
Then why
capital
Why is it
plan?
here? Because it's part of the capital plan. One of the things that was talked about, and I tried to bring up at the last meeting, maybe we can bring up at the next meeting that we go to, is that this is kind of almost a sledgehammer, in a sense of it's pulling out everything.
But
It's not
supposed to
talking about
cause-
funding sources.
Yeah, but it's not supposed to be what's part of our operating budget.
Well, and that's what I was trying to get across at the last meeting, and apparently did poorly, is
At
that.
the last capital planning committee meeting?
Right.
Okay. I
Is,
just wanted to
is,
make
is,
sure.
for
Yeah,
example,
I'm like,
we
okay.
might have
No,
a
no, I just
capital
wanted to
planning
make sure.
document internally.
Yeah.
That wouldn't necessarily be something, and again, in fairness, the capital planning committee is still learning its way.
Yeah.
So I think we need to be fair to them.
Yeah.
And I think as they start talking about, well, what's the difference between something that we know we're gonna bring to a warrant article versus something that we're gonna expect a department to fund out of its operating budget, then some of this will refine itself naturally. But you're right, the Chromebooks, for example, are something that we would expect to fund in our budget. The scoreboard, quite frankly, I would expect to fundraise for. I would not expect it to hit anybody's budget, because I think we can fundraise for that very
Sure,
effectively.
but there's a chance that we couldn't, right? So that's something that I think
Yeah.
does belong, but I mean, this is our sheet, ours meaning the schools
Right.
to present. So if it's
Right.
something, we can put forth whatever we want. So I wouldn't expect us to put something that's in our operating budget, unless there's a chance that we're gonna go ask for, put it on a warrant, then
So what
you
else
just take it off.
What else on this list is currently funded out of our operating budget?
I don't recall the drinking fountain protection really hitting any warrant article. I don't know.
We were able to fund a couple out of end-of-year funds,
Yeah,
so.
and same with the UPS, I
so
think.
Things that in the past that we've not put forth on a warrant article, we've made the decision to try to fund with end-of-year money. I think we're seeing in this budget with 425,000 cut last year, plus another 60 loss in grants, that we're not going to have the end-of-year money that we're used to. So I think something like a small thing, $5,000, which we spent last year to add the 2 water refill stations for water bottles in the middle high school, that would be the type of thing that we would normally pull into budget, like we did rugs and upgrades.
But I would
last
not,
year.
I would
But if
not
it-
take them, I would not take things that we will fund potentially at end of year off. I would take, or at least note on here, what we're paying for right
agree.
now out of Fund 10.
That stuff absolutely
That's
belongs
different
on this
than what, I think we leave everything on the list and say right now, but then there are some funding sources that we already have. We know where we've funded
But we
others.
pay for other stuff. I guess, but we pay for other things out of the operating budget that have to do with facility and capital.
Yes.
So
Why are some
why,
on and not
why are
others?
they not on here? And the grade 9 Chromebooks, which we've paid for out of the operating budget on a very specific and committed to process, that's on here. And
Right.
everything else that we pay for out of the operating budget that could also be on here, that we do every year and have done for multiple years, isn't on here.
I think you're right. I think the Chromebooks, we voted to transfer electrical and utility funds a few years back to fund the grade 9 iPads at the time. So that one is in the budget. And-
Then I
No,
would
but
think-
but Mark's point is, there are things on here that we have capital purchases and spending in the budget that's not on here. So we either have to strip it all out, all operating budget funded capital planning stuff out of this, which I don't think is helpful for the capital planning committee, or we put it all in and understanding that this was their format, but what works for us and what works for you, we either add a column, columns can be removed or hidden, right? You can remove the formulas and just give them the numbers, right?
Easy to add a column.
Right. So I agree with, and I'm assuming, Mark, that this is what you're saying. It's either we remove it or we put it all in. I for one, would rather have it all in. So we now have a capital plan for the school.
And I would only have it all in if every other department in town has their entire operating budget of
No.
furniture and fixtures on their capital planning list.
I think other than the Chromebooks,
So you're saying no?
correct me if I'm wrong, I think nothing
okay.
else really is typically funded and on an annual basis, et cetera, in our budget. Everything else is extra that we determine either to ask for it on a warrant, or we allocate some facility rental money, or we use end of year money, something like that. But the Chromebooks, I agree, are a different category. They're a recurring cost. We know we purchase them every year for the incoming ninth graders, and so maybe they should come off.
If they're the only recurring thing and no other department is putting their recurring operating budget expenses on their list, then I would say it should come off. If every other department is putting every bit of their operating budget on their capital planning list, then we should do the same thing.
But we're not putting the whole operating, but we're putting stuff related to capital.
Yeah.
Is that what you mean, the capital planning related issues? It's not the whole, we wouldn't put the whole operating budget.
No, not the whole but the portions of the operating
Right.
budget that we spend on capital facilities, et cetera. If the basis for the Chromebook item on here was anything associated with capital needed to go on this, regardless of funding source, then I would argue there's probably a lot more money that should be on here, and every other department would be doing the same thing. If that's not what every other department is doing, then I think we take the Chromebooks
Can
and
you
come
ask-
off.
It's also, so I think us, along with every other department in town, are trying to work through this, as well as a capital planning committee, trying to come to a decision on what belongs in there, what doesn't. So it's going to evolve. We can certainly ask. I think that we, as a school, have put a lot more detail than other departments, because
Yes.
have had the opportunity to. So, I mean, it can be changed too.
Yeah,
This
that's
isn't set
fine.
in stone. So we can take it off, and if we have to put it back on, we can.
So,
But I can certainly
so we
ask.
can ask, but we can also have a working document for us,
Mm-hmm.
and then a document that we present to the capital planning.
And part of this, and people can clarify for me, and part of this is a little bit of territorial issue when it comes to the capital planning committee that I have too, is it's my understanding or my belief that this list is going to be the basis for what is deemed to be funded and not funded on an annual basis. And so if we have something on this list that the capital planning committee does not include in the capital warrant that's approved at town meeting, it would be their understanding that it wouldn't be purchased. It's like us putting any other warrant articles up and saying, when we would go to town meeting and say, if this doesn't pass, we're not going to do X.
Because we're not going to put something forward that
That
we
we're
have
going to
money
do
for.
any, right.
Right.
So if this is the basis for the list that they're going to put forth in this consolidated article that's going to get voted on, and an item that we're going to do out of our operating budget on it, regardless of what that vote is, that's my concern
But
with
wasn't
having.
part of this committee also to identify what the town is spending, an audit of what the town is spending on capital needs first, and then transitioning to, then all right, then how do we fund, because there's not enough money in the town to fund capital planning stuff, right? In our own, we have the largest budget, but there's millions of dollars that we can't fund. So I think it's twofold, but we can, well,
Yeah, and
actually
the
Carrie
capital
will know.
planning committee from the very beginning has made it clear that that committee is not going to be the the people or the committee that's going to make decisions on what gets funded or what doesn't get funded. It's more of a collection of information so the town and all the committees understand all of the capital spend that's out there, and then people can make decisions based off of that. So it's not like you have to go to capital planning to get something approved. That's not the
They don't get a
purpose
veto.
of it.
It
Right.
could eventually
No, they
happen.
don't
So
get a
it could.
veto, but, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is one of the ideas that is out there is the capital planning committee is gonna come with basically a list at whether it's one town meeting or both town meetings of between the finance committee, the capital planning committee, et cetera, there's gonna be a dollar value of here's how much we can afford to spend in a year. And the capital planning committee is gonna come forth with a recommendation and say, the 2020 items that we think we support as being the highest priority are X, and they're gonna be in one article, not 15 articles like we have now. It's gonna be one article with a laundry list of what the capital planning committee has agreed collectively are the priorities for every department in town. And so it's going to be one article with the capital planning committee's recommendation, which is great. But if we have something that has no business being part of that evaluation, I
Well,
don't
that's why
think
we
it
need
should
to
be
update
there.
this with another column, how it's funded. Right? Because if we have operating budget or we have warrant articles up here. We're not asking them to fund that. The top ones are the must funds that, like,
Right, but
I'm not saying we're not asking them to fund it, but those have been, long before the capital planning, they were warrant articles, right? And we consider them must funds.
Right, so these will be in that list of things that they're recommending as must fund. They're not going to be their own
Well, they'll have
articles.
to be their own separate until we can get until they make that stop, right? Because they're multi-year,
Well, the least might be.
so they may
Yeah,
have to
they
stop
may
at
have
one
to.
point, right? Maybe we should, before we have Terry do all this work on the sheet, but at least have the conversation quick, because we have our meeting next Tuesday.
And they really are looking for us to send something back to them.
Yeah, it was due a week ago, and they asked for it again today, so we said
Then why don't we just take off the
tonight.
Chromebooks and send it
Yeah.
out? Unless, maybe Terry, you take one more look at it tomorrow just to see if there's any other Fund 10 operating budget items on there, and if they're not, remove the Chromebooks and send it out. Because there's no way we're gonna be able to, in the next 24 hours, take everything out of the operating budget and put it in there. That's.
Right. No, I
really wanna
don't
do
think, right, and I don't even think that's.
I say we remove it, and then at the meeting, we can have a conversation that we do fund. We're not the only,
Right, we're
department.
not the only
Yeah.
department that's, that'd be like the DPW putting every lawnmower that they buy, like, things that they do on an annual basis that would be capital. If they're gonna put everything that they purchase on this list that they buy out of their operating budget now, I think that'd be a lot.
Can I make a possible suggestion here?
of course.
Because they've already told us to redline things we were taking off in this case, because we were either removing them or they've already been funded. Could I suggest that I pick another color? I have no idea what color it will be.
Purple.
Purple. Purple's a nice color. And I would give it a legend, and I would take the Chromebooks, the drinking fountains, and the UPS, and I would purple line those, and I would give it a code, basically saying something like, Nancy and I can work on the actual wording. I was going to say something like, but I'm not saying this is the exact wording, typically funded from operating budget.
So I would say not to do that for drinking fountains and UPS,
Yeah.
because
Okay.
those are different. Those are one-time
Yes.
purchases that happen. Chromebooks are recurring, that
Okay.
we're
So
constantly.
just for the Chromebooks.
I
I
would do
think
just
so.
for the Chromebooks.
And the distinction also is, we made a very specific budget line item specification that ninth grade devices would be purchased through the operating budget, where the other things have come up and they're great, but it was, if we had the money, we did it, and if we didn't,
We did it.
So we,
They
so
did.
we purple line the Chromebooks,
Yes.
all right? So that's what we'll do, we'll purple
So,
line it.
so,
Make sure it's purple, Terry.
Right, I got it, it's gonna be
is
purple.
there a shade of purple that you would, there's
Very
two
deep
shades
purple.
on that device, so you might need
I would go
to.
one, well,
Raspberry?
I'll stop by tomorrow, we'll think. So wait, can I do not have my glasses, and this is killing me. Where is the Chromebook? Show me.
Here, do you want
the
this?
top.
We can zoom in.
Oh, all right, no, thank you.
I think they're,
Number 6.
number 6.
Well, we are not,
Number 6, yeah.
but we're not buying Chromebooks every single year for ninth grade.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we
we
do
are.
for the new ninth grade class. And they keep
then we
them for
rotate.
4 years
Right.
of high
That's right.
school. And then.
So that's what we are doing, okay, all right.
what
And
is-
then we pass some of the older, okay, that's right.
Why does the cost jump though, Terry, every 4th year to be 38.5 instead of 24.2?
Well, the
I think
2020,
eighth grade would-
when you get out, it's simply a projection. Okay, but in 2021, that was a number that came off the technology plan.
I wonder if that's the 8th grade that we have to buy every 3 years.
Oh, okay.
We double up on one, don't we?
Because we had funded the 8th grade out of, with school choice money.
Right.
That's what it is.
But we left them, theoretically, I think we left them in the 8th grade, but every 3 years we have to replace that.
Right.
That's
But-
what it is, because you go
Yeah.
4 years out.
Right.
Right, and
3 years out.
looking at the cycle, and again, when you go out 10 years, you're simply
Yeah.
looking and you're seeing, do you have a cycle there, or do you have something, and that's what it is.
No,
when
but
you
Mark's
move out.
right. We had to, we
Right.
had to go every 4 years, and we had to purchase another
Yeah.
round.
Right, we had
Because
to-
they were gone.
Yeah,
We had to double up.
Yep.
So I would just purple line, yeah, I think that's it.
all right, so we'll purple line that, and we will note it, as far as in a legend, what that means, and then we will submit it.
Who's on the capital planning committee? Ms. Roach?
You're
Okay,
very cranky today.
that's not true. That's not true.
Yes, it says,
That
thankfully.
is not true. Is the rest in a working session?
I think so. Anything else? Everything
On capital
else,
planning,
all our
Everything
other-
else is budget in a working session, is it
Yeah,
not?
that's in. So from this, we will create the typical warrant articles for the committee to vote at our next meeting or the 26th because the warrant closes mid-March.
Right.
All right, you did the elementary school building committee. There's strategic planning in the budget process we're gonna do in working session. Elementary school building committee, you've already given that update. Any correspondence? I don't think there was any. Any old business, new business? So I will take a motion to go into working session, but then after working session, we're going into executive session, not to return to open session. So, Mark, you make that.
All right. I make a motion that we adjourn to, well, not adjourn, that we move to working session. From there, we will adjourn into an executive session, not to return to open session tonight.
And the executive session is to,
To discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining with the Millis teachers, clerical, and superintendent.
Second.
a motion been moved in second. Now do we have to do a roll call vote because?
No, because we'll go to
Not yet.
executive session from the
Okay,
working session.
all right. A motion's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.